There was an article, Madam Speaker, in a number of our papers around the country after Osama Bin Laden was killed. And these articles kind of troubled me, not because we haven't been aggressive in going after Osama Bin Laden for 10 years, but because of the message these articles sent possibly to the terrorist leaders around the world. And it indicated that the President wanted to reach out to the Muslim radicals, now that Osama Bin Laden has been killed, to say, you know, let's solve this problem and not have any further conflict. Now, that kind of rhetoric may sound good to many people in this country, but it troubles me because it may give the impression that we're trying to appease the terrorists in order to get them to stop their terrible terrorist activities around the world. And so I'd like to put into the record a few things that were said prior to World War II that I would like, if the President were paying attention, to listen to, because there's an old saying, those who don't profit from history are destined to make the same mistakes. I'd like to quote Lord Chamberlain, who was the Prime Minister of England prior to World War II. And he said this morning, I'm not quoting Lord Chamberlain, he said this morning, I had another talk with the German Chancellor, Herr Hitler, and herein is the paper which bears his name upon it as well as mine. We regard the agreement signed last night and the Anglo-German naval agreement as symbolic of the desire of our two peoples never to go to war with one another again. That was a speech that he made at Heston Airport on the 30th of September 1938. And it was part of the peace in our time approach that the Lord Chamberlain was taking. And he said later on, he says, I stick to the view I have always held that Hitler missed the bus in September 1938. He would have dealt France and ourselves a terrible, perhaps mortal blow then, but the opportunity will not occur. This is a letter that he sent to his wife in December of 1939. So he was trying to say that the reason he signed that agreement with Hitler was because they weren't prepared for war, and so he decided to give the Sudetenland to Hitler without any kind of a conflict. The thing that bothers me about that is what he said to the Czechoslovakian people. And he said, when we were convinced, as we became convinced, that nothing any longer would keep the Sudetenland within the Czechoslovakian state, we urged the Czech government as strongly as we could to agree to the cession of territory, and promptly agree. The Czech government, because of the pressure that was brought upon them, through the wisdom and courage of President Beneš, accepted the advice of the French government and ourselves. It was a hard decision for anyone who loved his country to take, but to accuse us of having, by that advice, betrayed the Czechoslovakian state is simply preposterous. But, in fact, it was a terrible decision that was made by Lord Chamberlain. Because what happened was, because of the appearance of weakness by going to Munich and signing a peace agreement on Hitler's terms, giving the Sudetenland, which was part of the Czechoslovakian Republic, to Hitler, it was the green light, because he suspected and felt that the free countries of the world were afraid of him and would back down in any case that might arise. And as a result, World War II started, and 50 to 60 million people were killed. It's very important that we realize today, as they did after Lord Chamberlain made this terrible mistake, that we should not in any way give the appearance of appeasing the radical Islamists, because they may think because we got rid of Osama bin Laden, we don't have the intestinal fortitude to keep after them, to destroy them, so that they can never be a threat to the free world again. I think it's important that we remember what Winston Churchill, who was an outcast in the British Parliament at the time, what he said for years and years and years. He said the era, I'm quoting Churchill now, he said the era of procrastination, of half measures, of soothing and baffling expedients, of delays is coming to its close. In its place, we are entering a period of consequences. He was predicting that World War II was going to start. And this was as far back as 1936. He went on to say later on, people say we ought not to allow ourselves to be drawn into a theoretical antagonism between Nazism and democracy. But the antagonism is here now. It is this very conflict of spiritual and moral ideas. Now that's what we're facing right now, spiritual and moral ideas of the radicals. It is this very conflict of spiritual and moral ideas which gives the free countries a great part of their strength. And Winston Churchill, who was vilified, was absolutely correct. They should have prepared for war. They should have let Herr Hitler know that there was going to be no giving of any quarter to him, and it might have prevented World War II and maybe saved 40, 50, 60 million lives. Winston Churchill went on to say after the war was about to begin in the House of Commons in 1938, he said, Britain and France have chosen between war and dishonor. They chose dishonor, and now they will have war. And they did have war. Churchill also said, and do not suppose that this is the end. This is only the beginning of the reckoning. And I hope our government realizes that this is not the end of the war with the terrorists. This is still going on. And although Bin Laden has been killed, there's still a lot of terrorists out there that believe we're weak and that we're not going to follow through and that they can prevail in the long run. And we need to send a message, like Churchill did prior to what Lord Chamberlain did by going to Munich, that we're going to be tough and we're going to follow through. And I think the President needs to send that message very loud and clear. Instead of reaching out, now that Bin Laden's gone, and saying to the terrorist world, now that Bin Laden's gone, your leader's gone, we ought to sit down and work this thing out. That is a sign of weakness. And I hope the President, when he makes this speech, makes absolutely clear to the terrorists that we're willing to do whatever it takes to protect America and the free world. As Churchill went on to say, this is only the beginning of the reckoning. This is only the first sip, the first foretaste of a bitter cup which will be preferred to us year by year unless by a supreme recovery of moral health and martial vigor we arise again to take our stand for freedom as in the olden time. And that was in October of 1938. We're in a war against terrorism. It's something that hasn't been seen since the 12th century, when the radical Islamists tried to take over Western Europe. A lot of people don't remember that, but they did. And there's always those radicals who want to foist upon the rest of the world their religious beliefs and the way they think the world should be run. And we have to, when they rise up again and again and again, as they will throughout history, I'm sure that there will always be radical Islamists who will want to make sure the rest of the world believes the way they do as far as their religious beliefs are concerned. And whether it's now, or whether it was in the 12th century, or whether it's going to be in the future, the free world has to be resolute of purpose and make absolutely sure that the message is sent loud and clear that we are willing to do whatever it takes to defeat the terrorists. And that means doing whatever it takes to get information from their leaders to make sure that we find the terrorists in whatever hole they've dug themselves in to protect themselves. I'm very happy we got Osama Bin Laden. I think it's a great step forward in the quest for peace, but the war is not over. It's going to go on for some time until the terrorists know that there's no possibility of winning. And the threat to our homeland from terrorism, the threat to the free world from terrorism goes on. And I'd like to end, if I could, to say to the President, I know I can't talk to him because he's not here, but if I were talking to the President, I'd say, Mr. President, when you make this speech, allegedly to reach out to the Arab world, make it absolutely clear, Mr. President, that we're going to do whatever it takes to defeat the terrorists, as long as it takes. And with that, Madam Speaker, I yield back the balance of my time.